Best intro. I totally forgot about all that. Good morning to most, good afternoon to others, and good evening to the viewing audience across the pond. I am your host, Jason Myles, here for another episode of Dudes in the Cheap Seats, brought to you by the wonderful people at This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for joining us on, for me, what is a very gross Saturday morning. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, so glad to have you back. And I know you guys are going to be joining us for the after party, the watch party, where we're actually going to watch an uncut version or director's cut version of Nightmare on Elm Street 5 that, according to JG, has a very pivotal scene that makes the whole movie. All that being said, TIR is a listener-supported labor of love, and we can't do this without y'all. So if you enjoy what we do here on TIR and have the means and feel so inclined, become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You can not only make sure we stay on the air, but you can access champagne rooms, patron-only call-in shows, and, of course, things like we're doing tonight with the cross-patron GTAA Parallax Views TIR watch party for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. You can judge for yourself how you feel about the movie in the canon of the series. On this episode of Dudes in the Cheap Seats, we're going to be examining the 5th installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, The Dream Child. This movie takes place once again on the aforementioned Elm Street, where vengeance-seeking child murderer is resurrected through impregnation. Our heroine in this 5th film, Alice, is a survivor from the previous installment. She believes Freddy has been vanquished for good and is haunted by dreams of the maniacal madman. Freddy indeed returns, kills all of Alice's newfound lifelong friends, whom she just made after Freddy killed her previous batch of actually lifelong friends. To me, the story is don't be Alice's friend. It's like dating Charles Bronson. In any film he was in post-1974, you're gonna die. While critics panned the 5th chapter of the Elm Street saga as a cash-in on the very popular IP, the slasher genre was starting to get cliche and stale. The original film is rightfully credited as helping revive the genre with a totally new approach to horror, where the bad guy wasn't a silent, masked, knife-wielding killer, but a benevolent being from beyond the grave, seeking revenge for what he feels is his tragic death. While the child sex element of the Nightmare series was extremely downplayed due to the film being made at the height of the Satanic Panic, the viewing audience still understands the monstrous Freddy Krueger to be an unrepentant child murderer who somehow escaped the law. It would be the parents of his victims and potential victims that would burn him alive, preventing him from ever harming a child again. But they would be spared his wrath, as Krueger would seek recompense by taking the souls of their children. By Nightmare 5, we get a plot line where we get to see Freddy's origins. Born of the gang rape of an innocent nun who was trapped in a room with 100 crazed mental patients, Freddy represents America's fear of the urban super predator and the idea of the demonic child predator that infiltrates schools and daycare centers. These people are manufactured evil, destined to become real-life monsters, and these monsters did exist in real life during the 1980s. Serial killer and serial child rapist Richard Ramirez, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 is the virgin birth of the Antichrist. Freddy isn't the son of God sent to die for our sins. He's the son of 100 maniacs destined to wreak havoc on the innocent. So is Nightmare 5 a slept-on classic, or is it a cash-in? Let's discuss. Here to discuss that with me is my co-pilot in these cheap seat endeavors. Please welcome host of Parallax Views, JG Michael.
Yeah. This is going to be fun. Also, I'm not sure it's an either or, man. Like, it can be a cheap cash in and also, you know, an underrated classic. I'm going to make that case.
There you go. That's a fair case, and I will not argue against that. And also Nightmare aficionado and my good friend. Please welcome host of Give Them an Argument, Ben Burgis.
Yeah, I mean, stated the way that you just did, I'm not sure I even disagree. I mean, I love Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The original claim that I heard, right, when this episode was being pitched to me was that JG thought that it was better than 3. And that I would have to disagree.
I prefer 4 and 5 to 3 too.
He prefers 4 and 5.
I didn't say it's better, but
he's Team Alice, is what he's saying.
I am Team Alice. I'm Team Tuesday Night. I prefer Tuesday Night to Arquette.
Ooh,
We're coming for you.
Damn, you're coming for Patricia Arquette. You think she's a little too sedity? You think Tuesday Night really, epitomizes suburban angst and fear?
I just like the theme song she did for Elm Street 4.
Oh, okay.
Living in my nightmare.
Okay, well, hold on, though. If we're going to judge movies by theme songs, I think the discussion's over.
Oh.
Hey, well, listen, 4 has Dramarama, which that's like a Mortal Kombat fatality against Dawkins in Elm Street 3. I'm sorry, Dramarama, I'll give you anything. Just blows it out of the water.
Okay, except as you're saying that, like, I sort of vaguely, I mean, I've seen this movie like at least a couple dozen times probably, and I sort of vaguely know it, like, remember what the theme song is.
I don't know what the theme is for 5. I was thinking
any normal person can't hear the prise Dream Warriors without actually hearing singing in their head.
I've actually forgot that Dramarama is in that scene where the kid is killed, right? Or it's like a training scene.
Exactly. After where Alice is training.
That is kind of a badass
happening
song.
to me. That's in
I you know what? And I don't even think George Lynch would argue with this. I'd much rather hear "I'll give you anything" over Dream Warriors. Does Freddy's character evolve, Ben, in Chapter 5 to deepen the lore, or does it devolve to sell merchandise?
Neither. I mean, I think there's more lore that's added. I don't know that the character has evolved exactly. Like I feel like the character is kind of feels to me like the character is about the same. I mean, like, you go back to number 1, which, this is the other thing. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit on Thursday night, during the Enter the Ninja viewing after that. I think number 1 is like head and shoulders above anything that comes after it. That's by far my favorite slasher movie. It's a real contender for my favorite horror movie, period. Because it's just a perfect combination of being this sort of, this sort of, like popcorn, like teenagers get slashed movie with with being sort of dreamy and mythic and something very different. And as part of that, in number 1, Freddy doesn't talk much, right? Like there are a few sort of previews of what he's going to become, right? I mean, most notably the tongue coming out of the phone, and I'm your boyfriend now, Alice, right? But for the so they're like playing with that a little bit around the edges of it. But for the most part, in number 1, again, Freddy doesn't even talk much. I mean, he's mostly just kind of skulking around creepily, claws scraping against the furnace, all that stuff. And that's part of what makes it so effective. 2, I think we can politely ignore. And then like 3 through 5, you're definitely getting a much more chatty, much more quippy version of Freddy. But it feels sort of fully, it feels like more or less consistent, like the actual like portrayal of the character across those 3 movies. Then, of course, by 6, he's a
cartoon character. He's Wile E. Coyote.
Exactly. He's fully just Wile E. Coyote. I mean, like he's literally doing shit like,
I think he does do it. Is that I'll Get You My Pretty?
He does the Wile E. Coyote skit in it. Yeah. I think Elm Street 5 is interesting to me because, and Robert Shea and other people have said this in Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy, and I think it's true. John Kenneth Murr, the horror scholar, has noted it's a much more, it tries to go a little bit more back to the roots in the sense of it's a more grim and dark and kind of like, to be honest, it's a very mean-spirited film. I mean, it's dealing with issues like teen pregnancy. A lot of people focus on the abortion thing. I think that gets way too much press when talking about this movie because it's no more a pro-life movie than is like an anti-adoption movie. It's really about a woman having her autonomy invaded. And almost Freddy is like a patriarchal force, and the maternal force has to defeat him. But putting that aside, it's a very interesting movie.
There's a certain sense in which she does get an abortion.
What's that?
I mean, there's a certain sense in which she does get an abortion, supernaturally.
Well, yeah, I see. Well, there's definitely a force that's trying to control her autonomy in it, which is Freddy. So yeah. I think that what makes this interesting for me is it comes out in '89, the same year as Halloween 5, which also is like an equally really, really grim and mean-spirited movie. And if you start watching the movies made from like 88 to 92, there's a lot of these like really mean-spirited horror sequels. Child's Play 2 is another one that I would say is extremely mean-spirited. I mean, Alex ends up with this adopted family in like a foster family in Child's Play 2. They're just like, not very great people, especially the foster dad. These movies are much more mean-spirited in the late 80s and early 90s, and I think it's reflective of the fact that like there was this fatigue culturally with the stupid, Morning in America phony optimism of the early 80s Reagan era. And that's why I like these sort of like late 80s, early 90s horror sequels like Elm Street 5 and like Halloween 5. I think there's a bit of a meaner edge. And this one deals with a lot of like weird issues. I mean, it also deals with, there's allusions to teen suicide, drunk driving. And the big one that everyone notices is the bulimia, anorexia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It deals with some serious issues, and it's a
would you say though that's kind of indicative of I would go, I don't know if deeper is the right way, but I can't think of the guy's name. He's dead now. He made all those teen movies everybody loves.
John Hughes,
yeah. John Hughes, everybody cites him as being the man that actually gave youth a three-dimensional view.
Yeah.
I think a certain type of youth, though. But that being said, he did try to explore, actually young people having feelings and emotions.
Heathers did it better.
Heathers is another movie where they kind of talk about this as well. Do you think this movie, I don't want to say cashing in, but kind of mirroring what's popular at the time with teen film?
I mean, do you want the honest truth of it? I think they were flying by the seat of their pants with this whole movie, because it's made like Halloween 4 to Halloween 5. Like Halloween 5 is made within a year of Halloween 4 being done in theaters. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 is made within a year of Elm Street 4. Like, this was really rushed into production. And if you watch Never Sleep Again, they were literally like working with an unfinished script. They didn't know how the movie was going to end.
Is that indicative of where we are with movie production in the 80s, kind of hyper capitalism of sequels? We don't really see sequels in the 70s and 60s like the way we see with drive-in films in the 50s. And the 80s is supposed to be a return to the greatness of America through deregulation and quote unquote smaller government, but we know that's not exactly what Reagan did. Is that a part of the Nightmare series and kind of a lot of these horror movies as well?
Do you want to comment first, Ben? I know I'm being a motor mouth.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's small enough to drown in the bathroom, but big enough to lock up an unprecedented portion of the population. fund some contras.
Yeah.
You found some loose change in the couch to do shit like that.
I didn't realize that government actually got large. To read JG's book, yeah, government got larger when Reagan stepped out. But there's this the era that you're talking about.
Famously, that's the era of the massive ballooning budget deficit, all that stuff. But
yeah. But there's this moment, right? 80 to 92 that we're kind of under the rule of conservatives. It doesn't change much under Clinton, but there's a veneer that the conservative rule is gone. For a lot of people, it's ding dong, the witch is dead, right? And we don't have to get into that right now.
But I think what's maybe like, okay, sure, Clinton is continuing, the substance of Reaganism in lots of ways that anybody who's a big enough fan of one of these shows to be watching us do a Nightmare on Elm Street, episode doesn't need to be told about, right? But I was just going to say, the thing that feels relevant for since we're talking about movies, right, isn't policy, right? It's vibes, right? I mean, like that's what's going to matter for pop culture, and the vibes are tremendously different in the 90s.
That's what I wanted to get at with the movie. When I say that it doesn't have that sort of like Morning in America vibe, and it's like Morning in America fatigue, it's not even like a political thing for me. It's like, I do think there was this phony optimism in the 80s, the Morning in America mentality. And I think by the late 80s, everyone, like, these movies are really angry by like 89, whether you're talking about the Halloween movies or Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think it's indicative of where people were at. They're like, this phony optimism sucks. And the original Elm Street definitely comments on the same things this movie comments on. It's commenting on parental neglect and all this stuff. But with this movie, it's even more in your face. Like, the movie is sort of just like, suburbia sucks, like, it's a very pissed off little film in a lot of ways. And very gothic too. It's a very odd film.
How does the tone and style of Dream Child compare to the previous entries, Dream Warriors and Dream Masters? I'll let you go first, JG.
Well, I think Dream Warriors is the sort of like big budget MTV version, and then the fourth movie is sort of the lower budget MTV version. This is, like I said, this is like the gothic Freddy movie. Like, it's like all the set pieces are very gothic. The asylum. I mean, it's a very odd film. The vibe is very different. Freddy Krueger almost comes off as like a Phantom of the Opera type character in this. Really? Just with his mannerisms and whatnot. I do think it's trying to go back to a darker take on the character. It doesn't really do that fully, but there is that aspect of it.
Ben? You're muted. Uh-oh.
I guess I'm not sure that the character feels particularly different to me for the most part, but I do agree that the tone overall is darker, right? I mean, like, number 3, I mean, if there's a Morning in America Freddy, it's definitely number 3, right? Like,
right.
It's I mean, well, in their own very different ways. I mean, I feel very differently about these two movies, but I mean, 1 and 2 are both much darker than 3, which in fact I think is part of some of the reasons that well, I do. I was saying earlier, I would rank it higher than you do. It's always been a little bit crazy to me, right, that there are all these people who think that 3 is better than 1. I think that's just like kind of obviously not right. But I think a lot of times when people say that, I mean, not unlike sort of Terminator 2 versus Terminator or something like that, what they're really responding to is the sunniness of 3, right? I mean, that it's got this essential optimism to it that like none of the other movies have, at all, really, right? Like that, it's like, it's not just that, you can sort of have one final girl heroinely survive to the end. You can have like a whole team of friends that survive together because they work together and they found their special, powers, right? I mean, that's the Morning in America, American Nightmare. And then 4 is, 4 is the one people call the MTV Nightmare, because I mean, like 4, like literally you see Freddy Krueger in sunglasses on a beach, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't go.
He's hosting MTV by 4. Remember, there was I don't know if you guys remember that, but he hosted
listen, can I butt in? Not just MTV. You have to remember, like by '89, you have Freddy's Nightmares on in syndication, which lasts 2 seasons. I mean, Freddy Krueger, people don't realize this, I think, today, how big Freddy Krueger was in the 80s if you look at the statistics on it. Like Halloween 4 and 5 did well in theaters. Halloween 5 not as well as Halloween 4, but even Halloween 4 only made like I think 15 to 20 million. The Freddy movies were making like 50 million and above.
Yeah,
on
the
very
Freddy,
low budgets.
The Freddy
like,
movies,
yeah.
I would say this. In 84, everybody's sick of slasher movies unless you're a young person that has cable. Because I think what people forget when they do the slasher analysis, or I don't really see it added in, is the fact that maybe movie-going audiences were fed up, but for younger people that weren't old enough to go to those movies, because it was either R, there was no PG-13, right? If I'm rewatching this stuff on cable or video cassette. So for me, the first time watching Prom Night is in the late 80s. The first time watching The Prowler is in the late 80s. So the slasher genre doesn't really fade for people of our generation. And Freddy is the anti-hero for Gen X. Because Jason Voorhees, as popular as those movies were, he doesn't talk. He doesn't do anything. He's not cool. Freddy made everybody else cool because now you had to market these mass murderers in a different way. They had to be more exciting.
Well, there is a reason why, like, okay, like Michael Myers, if you watch, as you and I know both do, JG probably also, like, a tremendous number of YouTube videos.
Can I say something real quick? Thank you, Ben Grimm, for joining the live chat. He's one of my friends, but go on.
Oh, nice. That, like, YouTube videos about these movies, whenever they're talking about Hulk, it's like, oh yeah, this stuntman, right? Played him, right? And then in this other movie, this other stuntman played him, and whatever. It's like pretty deep trivia, right? Whereas Freddy just is Robert Englund.
Yes.
Right. Like his, they're really, the character is just completely inseparable from the actor. I think one of the reasons they haven't been able to bring it back, and why the remake was such a abortion, is since we talked about that for this one. But yeah, he is, like, you're watching it for Freddy in a different way than one of the Killers in the Mask movies.
Yeah, the Killers in the Mask movies. Again, I think was it 6? Friday 6? Is that the one where the guy dies in the toilet? Or is that 5? I was good.
No, it's definitely 5. It's 5.
It's 5, right? Yeah.
It's
5.
It's the Jason.
That's Friday 5, the Danny Steinman one. Yes.
Yeah. I love the movie. Hate that scene, but
Fair.
no black man sings on the toilet to his girlfriend who's standing outside of the toilet singing along with him.
I mean, Danny Steinman was probably on a lot of coke when he came up with that.
Right?
That's an Asian thing. Yeah, that's only Southeast Asians that do that. It's only. But seriously,
there's something you haven't mentioned about this movie that's kind of important. So Nightmare 5, and they talk about this in Never Sleep Again. And I never thought about it until I saw it in Never Sleep Again. But they consulted a lot of, like, splatterpunk authors that were getting popular at the time, like David Shaw. And I think Shaw actually did, like, fix-ups for the dialogue. But Shaw ended up doing Leatherface Texas Chainsaw 3, and that very much has a splatterpunk influence.
Yes.
It was sort of this, like, literary micro genre of horror that was very punk influenced and very violent. And I think that goes back to the whole splatterpunk is sort of like a response to the, all too often cheeriness of the early 80s. So
yeah, it's gore for gore's sake. And some friends of mine are in a pretty popular splatterpunk band called Ghoul. So shout out to Ghoul. Check out Ghoul. That's a good point. I do want to ask you guys, what kill stands out as the most inventive or ridiculous in this movie for you guys?
In all of them, or just this one?
Just this one. 5.
Greta.
In what way?
Well, in the uncut version, he feeds her own intestines.
Wow.
It's a very dark scene. Like
That's the girl that's
that's the girl that's bulimic, and her mother is like pressuring her to be a model. Yeah, that's the other weird. I find the characters in this much more relatable than one would expect from like the fifth entry of an Elm Street franchise.
It reminds you of your
there is time given to sort of developing them. You know, I mean, it's not like they're super three-dimensional, but like they're kids.
But do you find yourself at some? Ben and I were watching this, and I remember this. We were watching 5, and we were thinking, your friends all just died in the last one, and now you have a new crop of new friends the following school year.
Hey, it's Elm Street logic, man. I don't. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, I was like, damn, I just don't care.
We're like, how'd you get lifelong friends so quick?
Well, yeah.
Hey, Dan comes back.
At this point, she's on her third group. Oh, deep friends, right? The first two haven't been massacred. Friends. I mean, I've got to say, like, it always. I mean, in a weird way, it's a very minor complaint because I actually don't think very much about these movies would have to change if you change this. But like, I always kind of thought it was a mistake to have 3 through 5 be in continuity with each other. I mean, just have it be, you know, just have it be a new group of teenagers be massacred. I mean, you know, I know
a different Elm Street in a different place, right? Like. There is a true crime documentary.
Every town has an Elm Street.
I believe it's called Every Town Has an Elm Street. Yeah,
I get that sort of criticism, but this is also one of the more interesting Elm Streets because this is the first one that grows up with its fan base. Because the people that were seeing it in '84 had grown up by that point, and now they're all adults. And this is like the movie where the Elm Street kids, they're graduating, they're entering adulthood. And it's like they're ready to take on the world, but they're also trepidatious about it. And it's like the first one where they enter the adult world, you know?
That's an interesting point. Well, yeah. Well, I guess Nancy kind of is because she's the survivor of the first round of his revenge killings, right? She enters the adult world, but I guess she dies in 3. She sacrifices herself.
But I'm saying it's the first one where all the characters are entering, you know, adulthood, like 18 years old, ready to take on the world, and then reality hits them in the face.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy in 3 is a graduate student, you know, having an implied affair with her boss. So, you know, it's you know, pretty adult, you know.
No, that's actually an interesting point, though, that the kids are finally growing up and leaving school, because in all the other movies, they are just kind of generic high school students that are perpetual seniors, I'm assuming, you know, unless they're supposed to be 25-year-old, 14-year-olds. But that's a pretty interesting point.
Yeah, I think so.
Does Alice work as a good final girl in this film?
I think Alice is I think she's better in this one than the fourth one.
How does she compare to Nancy?
Listen, I'm not going to comment on that because I like Heather Langenkamp, but Nancy is not the strongest final girl in that first movie.
Disagree.
Okay.
I think Nancy's really good in the.
I smell an argument.
Well, that's Ben's show, isn't it?
Yeah. We should change the title. I smell an argument.
Yeah. I love the Smell podcast in the morning. Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I guess I do think that honestly, one of the things that makes one stand out for me is that and you know, for that matter, New Nightmare stand out for me. You know, because she's in an interesting way. She's both recapping that performance and doing something different in New Nightmare. Is that like the ones with Heather Langenkamp like really feel to me like the only ones that are sort of marked by the personality of the final girl in quite that way, right? Like it's like that feels like the feel of the movie has a lot to do with Nancy's personality in a way that it never quite does for any of the rest of these. I mean, like, you know, I love all of them, but I feel like for almost any of these movies, you could just kind of like, swap out, some other anxious chick not quite dying, at the end of the movie, and like most of the movie really wouldn't feel that different to me.
I think the issue I have is just that I think Heather comes off as very green as an actress in the first movie, and maybe that works for that movie. I think by Wes Craven's New Nightmare, that's her best performance in the entire series, for me at least. But you're right. I think Lisa Wilcox as Alice. I think there's sort of. I think she was much more comfortable in 5 than she was in 4, because I think 4 was her first big role, and she was more comfortable the second time playing the lead.
Switching gears a bit. What does Freddy as a cultural metaphor? What does his origin story in Dream Child say about America's fear of crime, mental illness, and urban decay? That was the first thing I noticed in rewatching it the other day, getting ready for this show. Was I was thinking about the Super Predators. This is being made around the same time as Central Park 5, and right before that, the Central Park Killer. So there is this idea that there are people just born inherently evil. We also have gang crime and drug crime on a level that we won't see again. It'll ring in mass incarceration. And we believe that people are just born evil. And the whole story of Freddy, which is fleshed out in this, the son of 100 maniacs, is that he is kind of the embodiment, like I said in the introduction. This is the virgin birth of the Antichrist in Freddy. So how do you guys view him as a cultural metaphor?
I mean, I guess my first thought, at least, would be that to me, it doesn't actually feel like too much of a reflection of those anxieties. I mean, maybe there's something to be said here about the fact that the movie revolves around pregnancy, right? Which it's like how all the great 1980s time travel movies are about like pregnancy and motherhood, right? Back to the Future and the Terminator. But I think that for the most part, I mean, the reason it doesn't feel that much like that to me, and maybe, I mean, some of the scenes are going to be fresher, right, in your mind than they are in mine right now, but is that it doesn't really seem like the kind of like dangerous deviance, you see in those scenes or whatever, they don't feel particularly urban to me, right? Like it just feels like, so to me, that element of the movie feels less like a sort of up to the minute reflection of anxieties about, crime and drugs and, all that stuff than it does like a throwback, right? I mean, this is, it's kind of going to what JG said about, this being, the Gothic nightmare movie, that this is that whole element, right? I mean, that, the insane asylum, that's like really like a very, very, like, I mean, even by, 1989 standards, right? This is a very not of the moment. It's, this is like a very old timey vision of what like a madhouse is, right? And that feels to me like an element that, if anything, would be more at home in like a horror movie from the 1950s.
JG?
I don't know. I think this movie reflects cultural anxieties of the time in a similar way to there's two Elm Street films that I find really interesting that kind of almost work as like standalones, which is this and then Elm Street 2. Elm Street 2 reflects cultural anxieties about same-sex desire. It's a gay panic movie, essentially. And I do think there's an argument to be made for why LGBTQ people reclaimed Elm Street 2, but that's another topic for another show. It reflects those cultural anxieties, though. And I think this one reflects cultural anxieties about teen pregnancy. And it does so in a way that's really interesting to me, because Alice really is not judged in any way in this movie for any of her choices. So that's why I say I disagree with people that just think it's a pro-life propaganda film. The stuff that you're mentioning about the sort of super predator, I think that's there, but I think that's a thread throughout the movies. And I think the teen pregnancy angle is just more interesting to me because it adds a twist to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really don't
see in the other ones.
I have to say, I really don't understand the sort of pro-life propaganda interpretation of this, right? Like it's I mean, pregnancy, there's discussion about whether to have an abortion, and
it's one scene too. It's the scene between it's the scene between, not to interrupt you, but it's the scene between Mark and Alice where Mark says, well, there's one way you can stop it, abort the baby. And she just says no. And then there's no like thinking about it. It doesn't like linger on it. There's no big lecture from her about abortion is bad. And it immediately goes to the adoption thing. And she's like, no, I don't want you to adopt my baby. It's my baby. Like the whole movie is really based around the idea of her autonomy and how it's being violated by an outside force.
Well, there's also a lot of women that are involved with this movie as well.
Resist it being violated by anybody else either. And if it were pro-life propaganda, I mean, look, pro-life people love adoption, right? Like that's so if they're being treated as equally, no, that's not what I want, right? Like there's no distinction being made between them. That doesn't really make sense. And again, like that's just a weird, like, look, I mean, this is, if anything, this is pro-choice propaganda, right? I mean, that's the I mean, it all revolves around her autonomy. This is what she wants, right? She doesn't want to abort. She doesn't want to adopt. Very good. And it's and sort of resists attempts to to do the adoption thing against her will. But also, like, I don't know. I mean, it also seems like taking the plot of this movie literally is like, man, abortion might have been a good idea.
Right? Well, that's what Amanda Kruger says in the film, right? When she's having the baby, she's like, no, it's a monster.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
The other thing that's interesting about this movie is there's a lot of allusions to body horror if you watch it very closely. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally the whole ending where Freddy is inside her and like breaking from her body. That's not Robert Englund in that scene at the end, by the way. That's a paraplegic actor that like was like taped her or whatever. They held him to her. Like a legless actor. So he's like, that scene where they're breaking apart, she's breaking from him or he's breaking from her.
Like, how mad do you think a lot of actors were in the CGI era? Where they're like, what do you mean? I've been paying my bills for 20 years.
Right. Well, there's, I was going to say too, there's also the Dan's death sequence on the motorcycle. That is also really fascinating. And that's another scene that was cut in the by the horrible, evil, no good, rotten moral majority, Tipper Gore characters at the MPAA, because that scene, when you watch the uncut version, it's a special effects marvel, but it's also like very deeply indebted to the sort of ideas of H.R. Giger. Giger was like a big influence on that entire scene where the wires are like driving into his body, and there's sort of a body horror Cronenberg element to that scene as well. There's a few glimpses of body horror throughout this movie that I think that's another thing in common with Nightmare on Elm Street 2, is there's a lot more body horror in those two than some of the other Elm Streets, in my view, at least.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I mean, that's definitely true. There is much more body horror in those two than the other ones. I mean, I was just, I guess I was still thinking about the thing about pro-life propaganda. And I mean, like, in a way, it's like, it feels to me like a lot of people's reactions to these two movies, it's like you're sort of only picking up on a sort of one sentence summary of what the movie is about. Right?
Yeah, this movie is kind of just saying pregnancy is horrifying.
I mean, also too.
So it's like with two, it's like, okay, it's a movie that has something to do with gayness, and people seem to be very uninterested in whether it's like has to do with it in a sort of pro or con way, right? Like, and then like with this, it's like, okay, it has to do with pregnancy, and like there's a character who doesn't want an abortion, not pro-life propaganda, right? I mean, it's like both of those feel to me like it's sort of.
But would you agree though that's part of this kind of like over analyzing what we're doing right now of a lot of aspects of pop culture where people are trying to find the quote unquote hot
I don't think it's over analyzing at all. I think it's that people actually don't engage with these movies textually at all, and they just like pick up on whatever they want to pick up on, and they don't actually treat it as a text. I think they don't analyze it at all. They just go with the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think it's sort of underanalyzing because again, I mean, it's like if you actually stop to think about it, right? It's like, wait a second, why is it pro-life propaganda? And then you sort of start to answer it. It takes 30 seconds of thinking about that for that to kind of fall apart, right? Or
well, the issue is most people.
Number 2, wildly homophobic movie, but it's wonderful, gay Freddy, gay nightmare.
Well, we can get into Elm Street 2 at some point, but I mean, with Elm Street 5, it's I don't think the problem is overanalyzing. I think it's that people take a superficial reading of a movie that they don't read textually. They don't look at subtext. They don't look at where the culture was at the time. They don't look at the textual evidence the film is providing you for what it's trying to say, or not even what it's trying to say, but the cultural anxieties it's dealing with. All horror deals with cultural anxieties. And I don't think people actually give these type of horror movies the space or respect to textually analyze them in any serious way, because they say, well, it's a slasher movie.
I agree. And building on that, do you think the backstory of Freddy being the bastard son of 100 maniacs add to his mythos, or do they make him too cartoonish? Is this the turning point for you guys, this movie, where Freddy becomes more icon than villain?
I mean, I don't know that there is such a thing as too cartoonish in this context. I mean, to be honest, I was kind of into the numbers, Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Dream Demons.
Okay. JG.
Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead is where it all goes too overboard for me. This one almost feels like I'm referencing Never Sleep Again multiple times here, but someone in that documentary said that the scenes in the asylum are something out of a Roger Corman Poe movie. There is this sort of grandness to it, but I dig it in this case. I think it works, and I think you can get away with it in these movies because, whether or not the mythology around Freddy Krueger is true it's almost irrelevant. He is an icon to the people in Elm Street. He's become legend, so it's whatever story you want to believe about him almost. He is the dream demon, and, we create a backstory to him. And I think that makes it more interesting when you think about this is making excuses for the logical incontinuities, but when you watch these films back to back to back, there's a lot of logical inconsistencies and ignoring things from other films.
Oh, I mean, I started my morning.
Even they knew about the Watchtower in the third movie, but they act like no one knew about the Watchtower in this movie.
I opened my morning today with JG arguing with me about one line I wrote in the introduction, and we had this long back and forth.
That's because I'm a nerd.
I was like, no, it's in the movie. He fucks kids.
Where's that in the movie?
It's implied in 6.
It's not implied in 6, though. Yeah,
sure. So if you mean it's implied, I actually think it's arguably implied before 6. It's always this sort of idea that maybe he fucks kids is always hovering somewhere around there.
But taking out fucking kids, we were having this conversation, and I was saying that because we were joking, and I think you and I have joked about this too. If for those that don't know, the original script, he's a child molesting murderer, but because of the McMartin trial that was going on around the same time in Southern California and northern San Diego County. They take that element out. It was a little hidden too close to home, so he's just a child murderer. But when you take that out, there's a likability to him even as a child murderer, much like you see with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, an actual murderer who actually murdered children, but he never got prosecuted for the over 40 molestations that they had linked to him. Where he would literally take children out of their rooms at night, take them back to his place, molest them, drop them off with change to call home, and he did that over 40 times. The DA in LA, I believe, decided that they didn't want to have the kids go through all of the trauma, the families, be re-traumatizing these kids multiple times. So they were like, we have him on the murders. We don't need to traumatize the kids. So the lore of him becomes, to some, a sexy, satanic murderer. Do people try to fuck him left and right when they know that he's fucking little kids? Probably not. The Freddy movie's not going to have a million chapters if that subtext is brought out like they do in the remake.
Yeah, no, exactly right. But I think that's exactly the right way to put it. That the subtext is brought out in the remake, right? That the subtext is always there somewhere, right? But also, if they just came right out and said it, then it would be like, oh, gross, right? Where
Right.
which is one of the reasons the remake doesn't work.
Oh, I hate the remake.
I've only gotten through 30 minutes of the remake, then I shut it off and never watched it again.
Yeah, unfortunately, for some reason, I've watched it. I think at least 3 times because I watched it.
Right.
I watched it in the theater when it first came
wow.
out, and I think me and a friend of mine just decided to like spend the day at the movie theater. I think we watched that, Hot Tub Time Machine. I forget what the third movie was, but and then I watched it again because I was getting ready. Oh my god, in 2020 I did this Halloween episode of the show where I interviewed Freddie DeBoer about an essay he'd written about the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and because like all the others were relatively fresh in my mind, I was like, oh, I should rewatch the remake. And so I did it with my friend Eli from Rutgers, and but she'd actually never seen the original, so we watched the two back to back. We watched the original and then the remake, which is just a brutal way to watch the remake. Like it's just that contrast is just so unkind. And then I think I might have watched it with Jason and Rosarito also.
We did. We watched because we were trying to figure out which Nightmare movie had the pizza scene. We couldn't remember.
It's 4.
Yeah.
It was 4.
Yeah.
We watched. I said, I think it's 4. We watched 4. We got done. And we looked at each other and goes, we should watch 5. And so we watched them in reverse order. But we watched them, including, we said we're going to watch Freddy vs. Jason, and we watched the remake. And I hated the remake because I'm not the big, and I think they do this in 5. What makes Freddy scary in 1 and really for me in 2 is that he doesn't have a massive backstory other than he's just a bad guy.
Right.
Like Michael Myers, right? You don't need the whole backstory. And by 5, that's really fleshed out. In 3, you get a little bit of it, right? Oh, this is his mom, by the way. They're just adding characters. By 5, they're like, we have to have a real deal backstory. This is how the rape happens, yada, yada, yada. I find that stuff kind of unnecessary and a little too much.
I could see that from a purist perspective.
I get that, right? I mean, in principle, I kind of agree. I mean, I usually like less backstory. I think that's, it's like, look, there's a reason that you fought with my father in the Clone Wars is a cool line, but actually seeing the fucking Clone Wars is a bad idea.
I like the Clone Wars. We should mute you for saying that bullshit.
You're lucky that I stay friends with you.
I'm a real Star Wars fan. You're a fucking...
I'm a fan of the actual Star Wars movie, not the fan fiction that was made in the 2000s. But yeah, in any case, like in general, I'm always for less backstory. Like I think it's like usually a better storytelling choice, not to flesh it out. I mean, like even outside of the most extreme examples of like abominations of movies like the ones we were just talking about, but I think in this case, I don't know, man, it's fun, right? Like, I mean, that's the, like, I mean, again, we've established a couple times in this conversation. I mean, I'm even an apologist for the Looney Tunes nightmare, number 6. I think that the sort of like over the top crazy Freddy origin stuff, I mean, like, usually I hate adding in origin stories to establish characters, but in this case, it just seems like good pulpy fun to me.
JG?
I hate Freddy's dead, but that being said, I love Rachel Talalay as a filmmaker. I think she's very underrated. Tank Girl and Ghost in the Machine. But yeah, I can sort of understand why some people like the sixth movie. The fifth movie, it's not that it's like the greatest entry. It just, the issue with Dream Child is, to be honest, I think it's better than it really has any right to be. And the fact that it came together at all as a coherent movie is kind of an amazing thing, given they didn't have a finished script when they made it. They made up the ending as they went along. And basically it was made within a year of Elm Street 4. Like, I think they rushed production and did it in like, I don't know. I think it was like a 4-week thing. Like, I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I mean, they definitely rushed the production a lot. And I don't know how, for a movie that was this rushed, I mean, it's kind of amazing that it actually sticks together pretty well.
It doesn't feel like a movie that's centered around the kills.
No.
Which I think is the flaw and what makes Freddy movies work in a way that I think his contemporaries doesn't work, because you can actually center a movie around a plot of him being a dad, him being a absentee father in the sixth one that wants to reclaim his daughter, even if just to murder her. These are the. Go ahead.
I wanted to say something before I forget. There's one really telling moment for me. I keep going back to that, like, Morning in America, and this is like the end of that, and this movie's pissed off about it. Do you remember the scene where they're in the loft and Mark is talking about how much he loved Greta, and the camera just pans over and there's a TV on, and it's Wally George. You know, Wally George was this big California TV host, like Morton Downey Jr., but for the California crowd, the West Coast. And he's like Mr. Ronald Reagan. I just thought it was interesting how it's panning over and you just see Wally George doing one of his like, America. And then it like, but the whole movie is like, these kids are just alienated. Their parents suck. Everything is terrible. You know, I wonder what you thought of that scene. Maybe I'm making too much out of the Wally George.
You know, I have to watch it.
Really interesting.
I was watching the movie and writing this script at the same time, so I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I was that engrossed in the film. The one thing that jumped out at me first was the quality of the special effects and the motorcycle scene where the boyfriend dies was incredibly badass.
I did just want to go back to the question about adding all the backstory, because I also think that the specifics of it, like, I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of obsessed with this idea from earlier in the conversation about people seeing this as a pro-life movie, and I think some of that might be as simple as that, like, you just get steadily more Catholic imagery, right? I mean, that's like just barely there in 1, right? You know, 5, 6, grab your crucifix.
I mean, they literally pull out like a Christian demonology book in this one. Right? You know?
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like just barely there in 1. That element definitely increases in 3, and then like here, like, yeah, the cat, like, there's tons of Catholic imagery going on, you know, in the movie. So it's like I think that vibe, as much as anything, is probably what people are responding to when, you know, which I get it, right? I mean, you see Catholic stuff and pregnancy in the same movie, right? Like I sort of see how people are connecting the dots there.
Yeah. Well, before we go, I have some lightning round questions for you guys.
Okay.
Freddy, Jason, or Michael Myers, Ben?
Oh, Freddy.
Okay. JJ?
Leatherface. It was.
Whoa.
Hey, Texas Chainsaw is the original, man. It started everything. Is that movie? I was telling someone you know, you were talking about Elm Street reboot. I hate the Elm Street reboot.
Oh.
Let me finish. It's one of those stupid Platinum Dunes remakes. I hate Platinum Dunes. I hate Texas Chainsaw remake. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 73, 74, whatever. I forget which year it was. That movie is like this accidental masterpiece made by a bunch of dudes that were like high on pot brownies. And you feel like you're watching and it was literally made by the mob to cover up for the fact that like their movie studio was just a mob studio to make pornos. So they're like, oh, we have to make a non-porno movie to get the FBI off of us. But it's this brilliant movie made by a bunch of pot brownie consuming people in Texas. And they're just stoned out of their mind. And they made something that feels like a psychological torture film that they showed at MK Ultra victims or the people at a black site in Guantanamo Bay.
So I agree with everything JG is saying right now. 74, by the way. But like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an amazing movie, but the question wasn't, Friday the 13th, Halloween, or Nightmare on Elm Street, right? The question was Freddy, Jason, or Michael, right? And like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an amazing movie, but it's not really like, I mean, it's not that Leatherface is really, I mean, that compelling the character.
Well, the family is, but
okay.
Yeah, the family is.
If you want my honest answer, I grew up on the Halloween movies, and they always felt the most grounded to me. So I'm a Michael Myers guy. But if I think Freddy has the most personality. There's more meat to the bone in that than any of the other characters.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a reason that Freddy versus Jason ended up just being a Nightmare on Elm Street movie with Jason.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's Jason. It's the name. Practical effects or CGI?
Practical all the way.
Practical, of course.
Yeah.
Alice or Nancy?
I love Alice because of 4 and 5. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we kind of did this earlier. JG would say JG is Alice. I'm Team Nancy.
Team Nancy. New Nightmare, the 2010 remake.
New Nightmare. What the hell?
I think that if I was in this conversation in real life and somebody said the 2010 remake, we'd have to take it outside.
Yeah, listen, all three of us can agree to disagree. You guys know I like Rob Zombie's Halloween movies, particularly the second one. We can agree to disagree on that, but we all have to be in agreement on Nightmare on Elm Street 2010.
I did not like it. I cannot take Kelly Leak from Bad News Bears as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, I mean, all of the teenage like I understand that like it's sort of teenagers in a slasher movie are going to look like they're in their early 20s or whatever. All the teenagers in that movie look like they're in their 30s. I just cannot suspend disbelief at all about the idea that these people are in high school. The tone is totally off. This sort of attempt to like do the like, oh, maybe he was innocent. You know what? Never mind. Right? Thing with the plot. Like it just everything about that was bad. There were no good decisions made in that movie.
Hey, you forgot about the other final girl. Who was Team Yvonne?
Is that from the 6?
No, that's the black girl that also survives this movie.
Oh, she does survive.
She's kind of a badass in this movie.
Thank you, DEI. We see you. I forgot. You know what? I like her better in People Under the Stairs.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
That's a great movie. That's one we'll have to cover at some point.
We're definitely going to cover that. I believe that they're planning a remake, and I'm mad because I think it's going to suck.
That's probably true.
Because
that is almost certainly true.
When they remade Candyman, it became this social thing. I was like, dude, you're really fucking this movie up.
Did you hear Jordan Peele is trying to get the rights for Texas Chainsaw?
Okay.
We kill niggers in these parts of town.
The other one is Taylor Sheridan, who, if he gets it, I'm gonna like riot. I do not want that.
I just sometimes Hollywood, you can leave things alone. There are movies that I'm like, I wonder what that would be like remade, but they're Roger Corman movies.
Right.
Like, what would Battle Beyond the Stars look like if it got a remake? I don't even know if it could be better because it's a pretty good movie on its own.
I do want to say before we go, I think one thing that's interesting about these Elm Street movies is, there's always that joke about like, oh, you hate the stupid teenage characters in these movies. I really don't hate many of the characters in these Elm Street movies. Like, they're not that, I don't find them particularly annoying. You know,
But
they're
that's the
just kids.
problem with the shit versions, in my opinion, JG. With the shit versions of those movies, like Demon Knight, let's say, there's characters or sorority babes in the slime bolorama.
Right.
They and granted, these are really, really more on the low
Hey,
budget.
Sorority Babes is awesome. You're talking movies like Madman, and what's the other one I was thinking
You
of?
said Silent Madness.
Silent Madness. Like they're just the most mediocre. Like that's truly the sort of mediocre slashers for me, at least.
Because I think that people are playing up what they think the trope is, and I think when you watch even a Jason movie, they're really not that bad of people. The nightmare movies are different because all of this is psychological because he's attacking you in your dreams.
Right.
So I think we can empathize with the characters a little bit more, especially in the first one, as they try to have.
Especially if you're a teenager, right? I mean, that's the whole point of these movies. It's like parents don't listen to their kids, you know. And it's kind of bold to say that in the 80s when everyone was like, let's go back to Leave It to Beaver America.
Yeah, I mean, all of the victims in all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are pretty sympathetic. I mean, really, the only one that really feels to me like it's giving you unsympathetic teens is Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah. No, I love my Catherine Isabel and Freddy versus Jason, though. Oh my god, they should have done Freddy versus Jason versus Ginger Snaps.
Sure, yeah. But I mean,
Ginger Snaps is a slap-on because it's Canadian. Is a slap-on horror classic. I've only seen the first two. They made like 4, right?
They made 3.
3? Yeah, dude. Huge Ginger.
I
get what you mean, Ben. Even though I'm just talking about my love of
Catherine. No, fair enough. But I mean, I'm just
also like one of the most Canadian.
Like that's the only movie where some of those characters seem to be written to be unsympathetic.
Yeah. It's also like the most Canadian movie I've ever watched. I'm just like, oh, this is so Vancouver. The entire cast is just Canadians. Like you can tell it's shot in Vancouver.
Oh, Jason Takes Manhattan, I think, is all Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Last question: who wins in a fight, Freddy or Magneto?
Freddy.
Wow.
How? I haven't thought of this.
Yeah, I know this is super nerd question right here.
Because surely, okay, I know your first thought is going to be that Magneto's going to win because he's going to use his magnetic power on Freddy's claws, his knives, finger knives, right? Mm-hmm. So he's not going to be able to use them, right? Everybody's going to have that as their first thought, but what you haven't thought about is that surely one of Magneto's anxiety dreams is his magnetic power not working, right?
He doesn't dream.
Oh.
I guess there's no fight then. Oh.
Is that like an established thing? I don't. I mean, yeah, if he doesn't dream, I don't know how the fight's happening.
The fight can happen in the netherworld because it's Magneto.
Well, I don't know.
His half brother can bring Freddy out just for Magneto to kill.
Okay, so
I'm just going to say Spawn interferes in this fight and kills everyone.
If we're loading the dice to the extent of suggesting that Magneto doesn't dream, that Dr. X is, bring like whatever, like, all that shit, like that's like, yes, under the conditions you have laid out, Magneto wins. If we're just asking all else being equal, right? Like, who wins? I still think Freddy.
I was thinking of the worst nerd question I could ask. Trying to be the Simpsons comic book store owner.
Like, you hit the jackpot.
Well, look, we're gonna go watch. And explain the cut. Is it director's cut, uncut? What is it again?
It's not a director's cut. It's the uncut version. So it's the version that would have been released had the MPAA not cut. They demanded like 30 seconds of cuts, but it makes a difference.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I was trying to figure out from what you were saying earlier if this is different from Jesus, I won't go there. Wow. All right. You know what? I lost my thought. Let's just go to the watch party.
This is going to be the show that has more comments than views, and it's all off the
Right.
last question. Originally, I was going to say Yoda, but
So real quick, if I could, this uncut version, I think it may have ended up on VHS, but it's mainly available through Laserdisc. And I think all the contents of it are destroyed at this point, the deleted scenes. That's why you've never seen them on Blu-ray. Now, that may change with the 4Ks that are going to eventually come out for the Elm Street sequels, but I don't know. But yeah, it's only 30 seconds of footage, but like I said, the reason I like this movie is I'm a sucker for like extremely mean-spirited, angry, pissed-off movies. And if you watch the uncut version, you realize, oh, this is an extremely mean-spirited, bleak, just fucked up movie.
yeah, Jacob says the death of the boyfriend and the chick eating herself is more graphic in the uncut version. Pretty sure those are the only differences.
Those are
let's
the
check
only
it out.
differences, yeah.
We are going to check it out right now. If you are a patron of my show, Ben's show, or JG's show, there should be a link already up. Join us in the watch party to watch Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. And I will remember to record from the beginning this time. All right. You guys all got your links up for your patrons?
Yes.
All right. Let's go. And we are out. Thank you.